After last week's overall QB1 finish, is Tua Tagovailoa a smash play this week against the Buffalo Bills? Alfredo, I see that Tua jersey hanging up behind you, so I am going to ask you first, is Tua a guy that you are starting with confidence as a QB1 this week?
So I knew there was a reason that you brought me on for this episode specifically. Now I know why. So man, I am a big Tua believer. As much as I love him, the Bills just have Miami's number right now. The last two games, the Bills have won with a combined score of 91-26. I know we can drop some narrative about good game script for Tua. I'm just not ready to risk it and put him into my starting lineup this week. So I'm out this week on Tua.
Totally understandable. And I actually, last night on the Mailbag Show, my two co-hosts on there are Troy King and Victoria Geary. Troy is a Miami fan.
Yep.
Victoria is a Buffalo Bills fan. I was hoping that we'd have some fun banter there. We brought up a question about that, and Troy just shook his head and said, no, do not, whatever you do not bet anything on the Dolphins or any of the Dolphins players. So that kind of seems to be the theme. But Lauren, I want to ask you the same question. Are you starting Tua with confidence this week, or are you a little bit worried about this matchup?
No, I am not starting Tua with any sort of confidence whatsoever. No, absolutely not. Sorry, Alfredo.
All right. Well, case closed. It seems like the first question was a very, very easy one for both of us. But I want to welcome everybody to another episode of The Launchpad. It is crazy to believe that we are already on episode 21. It just it still feels like I just started the show. And here we are, episode 21. I am joined with two fantastic guests today. After having Victoria Geary and Pat Fitzmaurice on last week, today I've got Lauren Carpenter and Alfredo Brown. Lauren, I want to introduce you first. So happy to be on a show again together. We did a show together all off season, 2 Point Stance. It was an absolute blast, and I'm so happy that we get to do this. You are everywhere now. Fantasy pros, fantasy footballers, NBC Sports Edge, Mayo Media Net, Bets TV, football guys. Did I get it all? Am I missing anything? Is there anything else that I need to plug for you there? All right. Well, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Somewhere that, unless I work somewhere now that I don't realize, I always have those nightmares, like harkening back to like college or something. And I was enrolled in a class that I didn't know I was in, and suddenly it's the final. Like, no, I feel like that's kind of my life now.
We'll let the audience know where they can find you on social media. If you've got anything fun that you're working on right now, we would love to hear about it.
Yeah, so you can find me at Stepmom Lauren right there on social media, and you can also go to my website, which is stepmomlauren.com. I put all of my new work directly on there. It's all organized either by video or article, or you can look at it by network that I'm putting it on, or just go to the homepage because all the recent stuff is on there. So I'm actually very excited because one of my jobs for NBC Sports Edge is I cover the Thursday night game, and we have no hyperbole here, the best Thursday night matchup probably in history tonight. And I get to write about it and then talk about it. It'll publish tomorrow morning. I'm so excited. It's going to be a great game.
The Thursday night matchup is usually kind of the not so great matchup of the week, but this one is going to be awesome. Kyler Murray against Aaron Rodgers. And for anyone that's watching the show before, what we do is we open it up with a few games that I've just kind of handpicked that I think I really want to talk about. And then we'll close with a preview of tonight's Thursday night football game. So be sure to tune in until the very end and we can get to that. And then my other guest down at the bottom of the screen is Alfredo Brown. Alfredo, you reached out to me a little while ago and we did a rookie dynasty startup. And, I just love the ambition that you showed at that time, just putting together a huge group of people. It was a ton of fun. Then I got the pleasure of meeting you in Canton. And I just love what you're doing, what you're bringing to this space, bringing a fresh face, a lot of energy. And you're kind of doing things the hard way by starting your own brand, but you are doing it very well. I've seen you and Dr. Vig with all your videos, and they have been just top-notch content. So definitely recommend checking that out. Let everyone know where they can find you on social media and where they can subscribe to your YouTube channel.
Yeah, thank you, man. So you can find us on YouTube, the Pretend GM, real easy to find. We're still, like you said, a young, growing brand. We just hit our 50th episode the other day. We started back in, I want to say it was like May or June. So, really cool time for us, just kind of growing and expanding. You can find me on Twitter at Alfredo Brown GM, just like you see there at the bottom there. And my co-host, I'd be remiss if I didn't give him a shout out, Dr. Vignesh Doraiswamy. You can find him on Twitter at Dr. Vig. And he's actually watching the show right now. That's awesome.
Love to see that. Friends supporting friends. It doesn't get any better than that. I had the pleasure of meeting Vig in Canton as well, and I'm sure I will have him on this show at some point. But anyway, enough of the introductions. We have so much football to talk about, kicking off in just a few hours. So let's stick with this Miami at Buffalo matchup. And what I want to know, and I'll throw this one to you again, Alfredo, to start with, what are we supposed to do with the Miami Dolphins backfield? Malcolm Brown is out,
Oof.
and Myles Gaskin's role has been impossible to predict week to week. So is Myles Gaskin the guy we start, or are we putting a little bit of faith in Selvin Ahmed? What should we expect today? Or I'm sorry, on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of going to give you the cop-out answer here, but I just don't think that Malcolm Brown being out of the equation really matters all that much, right? He had 8 carries over the last 3 games. Like, he wasn't the guy that was really doing much in the backfield. And man, Myles Gaskin, he's been so up and down. It's been weird. Every odd numbered week, he's been really good. Every even number week he's been awful. So it's an even number week. That means he'll probably be pretty bad. If you're in a pinch and you need like one of those low end running backs, sure. With the game script, he might get a few targets here and there. Man, it's just so tough to trust him going into a matchup, even like this one.
And I went through his game log and I was like, all right, let's find the trend. When does he have big games? When does he have bad games? I spent hours tearing through it and I was like, I don't
Doesn't
know.
matter.
It is as sporadic as possible. So I'm kind of with you. You know, you don't want to bench any sort of starting running back, especially when you know Malcolm Brown is out, but there's just so much uncertainty there that his floor is basically zero. But let's talk about the other side of the ball in this matchup, which is the high-powered Buffalo Bills offense. And Lauren, I'll ask you this question. Stefon Diggs has not had a boom game yet. I mean, last week he was just dropping 30-point games left and right, and it hasn't happened so far this year. So are we starting to kind of change the way that we should look at Stefon Diggs? Is he more of like a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2, or are you holding faith that he still finishes the season as a top 3 wide receiver?
I don't know if top 3 is really in his future, but I think possibly top 10 is definitely within his realm of possibility. And I am holding out faith that he is going to get back to that form of the Stefon Diggs that we know and love, because it wasn't a fluke last year. That was a trend, and that was what he is capable of doing. And one of the things that the Bills do so well is their ability to run that offense. And they don't really have much of a run game to speak of at all. So it's going to go through all of the wide receivers. I get so many questions and they're like, what happened to Cole Beasley? I'm like, he was Emmanuel Sanders. Like, exactly. I mean, it really has nothing to do with the player. It has to do with the offensive pieces around them. But as soon as defenses start really cluing into how they've evolved, like there is no Dawson Knox. So who knows? Maybe this could be a very good matchup for Stefon Diggs and he blows up, which if you don't want to deal with the headache of dealing with Stefon Diggs, that's when you trade him away. But yeah, I am holding out hope that he will finish well. Top 3, I think, is a little muy caliente for my taste on it. I'm a little bit more on the conservative side anyway, but I think I would put him in top 10 finish. I hope.
Yeah.
Because I don't have any shares of him at all, but I just think he's so good and he's so talented that it's definitely within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, it's frustrating to see. And I just kind of did a breakdown on him where I'm changing my perception a little bit. You know, we drafted him as a top 3 receiver, and I just don't know if that's really possible this week. Or this season. But for this week specifically, what I'm interested in is Xavier Howard, who has been fantastic this year. I know Kyle Pitts made him look a little silly a few times yesterday, or last week, but he's most likely going to be on Stefon Diggs this week. So, Alfredo, is this a game where you could see Emmanuel Sanders just continuing to do what he's done and have another big week with Xavier Howard shadowing Diggs?
You know, it's funny, Dave, because you talk about Stefon Diggs having this down year, and so much of that is because of Emmanuel Sanders, Dawson Knox. They've combined for 9 touchdowns. They have taken away all that awesome scoring that we saw from Stefon Diggs last year. Listen, it's so funny because you see like how jaded a fan can get. Like you're saying that Xavier Howard's been great, and I'm here like, dude, Xavier Howard, God, I'm so annoyed, but we paid him so much money. Like he hasn't looked like the same guy that he has been the past couple of years. He's still very good and still one of the top corners in the league. Man, when it comes to Emmanuel Sanders, though, going up against Byron Jones, I just think has been such a disappointment here in Miami. I mean, it's almost every time you see a receiver scoring on the Dolphins, they're beating Byron Jones. And Sanders, with that touchdown production that he's had this year, I don't know that I necessarily put him in like a wide receiver 2 range, but I think he's kind of once again a cop out. He's kind of in that 25 to 32 range, especially with Dawson Knox being out. Like Emmanuel Sanders just now this year with the Bills, he's just always a threat to score. He's taking everything that Gabriel Davis had last year. Everything that everyone wanted for Gabe Davis is now going to Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah, and Gabe Davis, don't even get me started, man.
Don't even
swing and a miss.
You, Dave, and I both.
I
both
triggered some people.
Gabriel
I see
Davis.
that.
Yes, it's okay because we're both triggered about it anyway. But have some stones, Alfredo. Yes, high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 for Emmanuel Sanders. Lock it in.
Whoa.
That's kind of the thing with Emmanuel Sanders.
No.
That's how he's performing every single week, but everybody's just scared to move him up their rankings. And like, at what point are we going to catch up? You know, Lauren, it's a little bit crazy, but that's why we like you. You're a little bit crazy.
We've met.
So honestly, I do not hate that whatsoever because this is a game where I can see Emmanuel Sanders very easily outproducing Stephon Diggs yet again. Let's move to another game, and this game is just loaded from top to bottom with fantasy football players. I'm just kidding because so many guys are injured on the Browns that we're missing quite a few of those big names. But Pittsburgh at Cleveland. And Lauren, I'll start with you on this question because we talked about Diontae Johnson a ton this offseason. We were both in love with him. I had him locked and loaded as a wide receiver 1 in the offseason. And that's what he's doing right now, is just putting up wide receiver 1 weeks. So heading into this week, or any week for that matter, should we just be consistently putting Diontae Johnson as a top 12 guy?
Absolutely. I think you should. If he doesn't have a top 12 finish, he's hurt. I think that's where we should be looking at Diontae Johnson. And the reason why we didn't was because of his case of the dropsies, which I don't know why that word is ever used when you're talking about like grown men who play football, but we use dropsies. And you know what? I kind of like it. So he had this case of the drops that he had to deal with pretty significantly last year. So he fell down that list of those are guys that I absolutely have to have on my roster. But in all honesty, Diontae Johnson is an auto start. Put him in your lineup. Don't worry about it. He's one of those guys that is going to get tremendous amount of volume and targets, and that is who Big Ben is looking for. And yeah, I love Diontae Johnson, and I'm so glad he's doing well this year too. It makes me happy.
I know. I couldn't really understand it. Like the way I view Diontae Johnson, I was like, if his ADP is late second round, I'd have no problem taking him. But I can wait till the 5th round and get him. I mean, I have him on almost every single one of my teams this year. Just love to see it. Don't worry about drops because they are not sticky year to year. You don't?
No, I don't, because everyone that I play in a league with listen to my stuff, which thank you. I appreciate that. But everyone knows the players I love, so didn't work out well for me this year.
Yeah, once you start putting all your takes out there, you know, there are some Jedi mind tricks that start happening in those home leagues that make it a little more difficult.
I was out Yoda'd. No.
Let me throw a question to you, Alfredo, and I'm going to stick with this game. Najee Harris has been a great fantasy asset this year, but I hate to say this, it's kind of been a volume-based production, not so much efficiency. So now heading into this week, he's got a very tough matchup against a stout Cleveland defense. So are you considering him a top 5 guy? Or are you tempering expectations just a bit because of this matchup?
Yeah, and you know, it's weird, Dave, right? Like you mentioned, he hasn't been the best runner, and we highlighted him in one of our last episodes where he's still averaging less than 4 yards per carry. He hasn't been great running the ball. It's been all volume. It's been nearly all receiving game, right? He had that one crazy game with 19 targets. It was just nuts for him. I wouldn't put him in the top 5. I do think, though, is that just like Diontae Johnson, like these two specific Steelers players, Najee, Diontae, they're very safe. I don't know that I could put Najee in the top 5 this week. There's just a lot of other guys with really good matchups. The thing is that you look at Big Ben, right? And we thought that he was just going to get crushed this year because of that offensive line. He actually really hasn't. He's been getting that ball out really quick and consistently to Najee. He's outside of the top 20 in sacks for quarterbacks. So, I mean, it's him being able to get that ball away. Cleveland is second in the league in highest pressure rate. So, I mean, this could be dump off city to Najee Harris. It always feels like Pittsburgh and Cleveland, they get together and they put together these 14 to 17 games where it's just not pretty. And there's not a whole lot of production. So I don't know if there's going to be a big scoring ceiling for Najee, but I think there's going to be that nice floor of just getting those receptions going in this game.
I actually am going to jump in here, Dave, if you don't mind. He's so used to me interrupting him. This is just it's my Indian name, either that or girl who talks off topic. But like, speaking of that, I have a conundrum, gentlemen. I have to pick 3 out of these 4 running backs. It is Najee Harris, Austin Eckler, Damian Harris, and James Robinson. I have to start 3 out of those 4. And I'm
Damian Harris
not
is
starting.
Easy fade for me this week. As much as I love Damian Harris.
Are you kidding me? They're going up against the whatever. No way. They're going up against the worst defense against the run. He can get schemed out of that game so easily if they get behind while all the other guys have a guaranteed workload. I still don't trust Patriots running backs to this day.
Lauren, so I just dropped a thread on this a couple hours ago on my Twitter. I have Damian Harris I've got him as my RB 18 this week. And for that exact reason, you know, every running back for the Patriots has a very specific role. And Damian Harris's role is early down and goal line work. So if they fall behind quickly, which I anticipate they do, you know, you got kind of that revenge game narrative with Justin Herbert after just getting spanked by Belichick last year. So now heading into Los Angeles. 45-0. Yep. So I think that this week, The Chargers are going to make a statement. They're going to go up big early. And if they do go up big early, Damian Harris is phased out of the game. So I think the only way he's going to, so don't get me wrong.
I'll think about this. I have Najee Harris sitting.
All right. I mean,
it's standard. It's standard too. So I don't really get a lot of the big work out of the passing game from Najee Harris.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I lean that. And plus, out of those 4, he's the one that has the worst matchup against Cleveland. And just like we said, Cleveland, oh my God, Cleveland and Pittsburgh. I don't think I know any deep-seated hatred in the NFL than between those 2 teams. And it's not about scoring. It's about who can kill each other faster.
Yes.
So that's like, it is so funny to watch that. It'll be like 6-3, but it'll be the most epic game you've ever seen because heads are flying off. Myles Garrett is whacking people with his helmet. It's like, oh my God, it's like a gladiatorial arena. Where are the lions? And the tigers run out and the bears start biting people's heads off. I think
that's what I'm expecting for this game. I mean, that's what I want. that always makes for some good football. Well, let's rewind and go back to this game. And Alfredo, I'll throw this question to you. D'Ernest Johnson. I mean, God, what he did last week in a primetime game just blew everybody away. But now it looks like Nick Chubb, there's been no official declaration, but he said that he hopes to play this week. So Kareem Hunt is out. If Nick Chubb is in, is D'Ernest Johnson somebody that you're still relying on this week at all?
Man, you know what? And it's crazy because I was so wrong last week on D'Ernest Johnson. And I had told people like, man, I prefer Demetric Felton over D'Ernest Johnson. And boy, did I get killed on Twitter. Got absolutely destroyed. Everyone's like, see, you don't even watch the Browns, bro. And yeah, D'Ernest Johnson just went off. But honestly, with Nick Chubb coming back, with the nature of this game, I don't want to start him if I don't have to. Like, if it's one of those, like, it's an if-then scenario. If I absolutely have to start D'Ernest Johnson because I have a bunch of injuries and I don't have running backs or bye weeks or whatever, then yeah, I guess if I have to. But like, I'm not just assuming he just falls right into that Kareem Hunt role. And even then, you're not always super excited about starting Kareem Hunt. So I wouldn't have him in my top 24 for running backs. Like there's a few other guys I might start over, like a Michael Carter. I might start over him, which might not be popular. Dude, honestly, even David Johnson, who just got resurrected, like Undertaker gif right there, like he's back and alive. Like David Johnson is back in. So there's a few other people that I'd probably start over D'Ernest Johnson this week.
I love so far
the D Johnsons. I can't with the D Johnsons. Oh.
We are less than 20 minutes into the show, and we have pretty much hit on every single one of our flag plans from the offseason, Lauren. We have talked about David Johnson, Deontay Johnson, Damian Harris, all of our guys. This could actually be a week though where Demetric Felton does have kind of a good game. I feel like he's.
I don't want to hear it.
I'm done. I am done trying to predict the Browns. The Browns. I'm done with them.
This.
Well, Lauren, I do have a question for you. Last question about this game, and this one is also about the Browns. So let's try to answer this one as best as we can. And this is about Odell Beckham Jr., who has just been disgustingly disappointing this year. Are you holding on to him, or is he one of those guys that you are okay just sabotage dropping and letting somebody else in your league deal with the headache?
I am all about rage dropping. I rage dropped Myles Gaskin, and I don't apologize because people pick him up. They're like, oh, I picked up Myles Gaskin. I'm like, oh, how's your headache? You need some Pepto because it sucks. No. OBJ is one of those I will sneakily include in with a trade because I think he still has enough name value that when you can add it to a bundle to increase value somewhere else, as opposed to just rage dropping, because I don't think OBJ cares that I drop him, but I want him to care, and he won't. So I really want to get something out of it. So I think I actually might put it together in a trade and then see if I can get something out of it. But again, if we're dealing with bye weeks, he's that one guy you're just never going to start. You're not sure. Yeah, you might have to, and that's totally okay. But if you can get something from it, see if you can bundle him in a trade.
Yeah, I mean, it is just the fall of Odell Beckham Jr. Like there's going to be a 30 for 30 on it someday. Unbelievable. This man was starting off his career with one of the just craziest starts to a career that we've ever seen. What was it? Like 1,300 yards for his first 3 seasons or something like that. And then just completely fell off a cliff after a few injuries. It is sad to see, but I am going to agree with you that I think it is time to drop him just because realistically, he's going to be your wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5. You don't know when he's going to have big games. Let somebody else deal with it. That's kind of how I'm looking at Odell Beckham. Sure. Well, let's go ahead to another game. And again, I mean, there are so many games. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of close matchups this week. It feels like they're all kind of going to be blowouts. It feels like a lot of lopsided affairs. This is one of the games, though, that could be pretty close. And I actually have the Detroit Lions pegged for their first win of the season. I think they finally pull out the W at home against the Eagles. So we've got the Philadelphia Eagles going to Detroit to take on the Lions. And I'm sure you guys have seen the headlines, but we have seen rumblings that the Eagles would think about turning to Gardner Minshew at some point this season. So, Alfredo, let me ask you, or I'll ask you, Lauren, because you are ready to go.
How badly does this hurt you, Dave?
I mean, I was all in on Jalen Hurts in redraft. Yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts was a guy that I had ranked as a top 5 quarterback, and I was loving him in redraft, but I was concerned about Dynasty because I didn't know what his long-term outlook was going to look like. I didn't know that we'd have to be concerned 7 weeks into the season. But Lauren, let's say you've got Jalen Hurts on your fantasy squad. Is he somebody that you're looking to trade right now just in case he does get benched right around the time of fantasy playoffs?
Honestly, if I have Jalen Hurts as my QB1, I would be slightly concerned. However, he has been doing so incredibly well for fantasy that it would be very difficult for me to bench him. So again, this is another situation where he is such a valuable trade asset now. He's a valuable trade asset. Ugh, I almost said asshat. Sorry about that. So he is useful in a trade. And I think he is startable until those rumblings of turning to Gardner Minshew actually mean something and they actually get a little bit more legs underneath them. I don't know if I'd push the panic button just yet, but if you're concerned about it, right now is the time to make those moves. And he has the value behind him to be able to get something from him. But I don't know, man. Should you start predicting quarterbacks? So I think I actually might start Damian Harris because you're a Jalen Hurts love and you're good old Cam Newton love. I don't know.
Hold on. I'm going to stop you there for a second, Lauren. All right. I was all in on Jalen Hurts. Still had him ranked as a top 5 quarterback. But I was one of the few guys, the day the Gardner Minshew trade happened, I said, don't expect Jalen Hurts to play 17 games. I got unfollowed by 50 people that day. Literally 50 people unfollowed me for saying that Gardner Minshew would take over at some point, and here we are. So, yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts, that'll last, fantastic. Though. Yeah, and Jalen Hurts, and I tweeted about that during the offseason too, where I said, I don't think there's any player that has a bigger discrepancy between their redraft ranking and their dynasty ranking than Jalen Hurts, because I just don't think that he has that security there. I just didn't expect it to happen midway through this season. But
I didn't expect it to happen at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to see. Alfredo, this is a pretty easy question for you. Miles Sanders is out. So my question for you is simply Boston Scott, Kenny Gainwell. Who do you prefer this week in this matchup?
I mean, this has been a year where all the Miles have been so disappointing. Miles Sanders, Myles Gaskin. If
Myles Garrett, though, he had a great game against the Bears.
Yeah, but he doesn't get me any fantasy points, so it doesn't matter. Man, if I have to just gun to my head and I have to pick one, Boston Scott or Kenneth Gainwell, I'm going Kenneth Gainwell. Just simply, he's got the better receiving skill. I honestly think he's a better runner too. I mean, the whole dynasty landscape was head over heels in love with Kenneth Gainwell, and then all of a sudden he dropped, and people were like, "Oh, maybe we weren't as right." And then he kind of falls into that Nyheim Hines role over there in Philly, and it's worked out pretty well for him. I think that if I remember this correctly, he's been an RB2 or better more times than Miles Sanders this year.
Yep.
And so now he gets this opportunity. I mean, we could get fooled, right? Like it could just mean no difference for Kenneth Gainwell, and then it's just Boston Scott goes in and takes the Miles Sanders role. But if I had to pick one, Kenneth Gainwell, I think, has a really safe floor. It kind of depends on what your matchup is, but Kenneth Gainwell is the safer one to me.
Yeah, this week for sure. This week for sure, I do agree also. And I'm just going to throw something in there real quick. Head coach Nick Sirianni, I think it was before the season started when he was talking about the running back room. This was very indicative of what you could tell from the coach's mentality, which is what I do. I try to like look into people's minds and be like,
that he's a crazy person. Yeah.
Thinking. Yeah. Especially he's talking about fertilizer and like tree roots and watering things. I'm like, you're talking to a room of grown men. Thank you, Tiki Barber, for that one. Anyway, but he said it was Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell, and Boston Scott. Like he couldn't remember Boston Scott's name. Yep. And I was like, oh boy.
And it shows because Boston Scott has had what, like less than 10 touches this entire season.
And he called him Kenny Gainwell. I was like, oh, now I see what's going to happen. So no more Boston Scott. It's just bad, but they actually have to utilize him. They didn't do that against Tampa Bay, which had one of the worst defenses against pass catching running backs. And they didn't utilize any of the run game again. So that's the only thing that scares me about with the Eagles in any kind of a run game. But Miles Sanders has not been good since entering the NFL. Yeah. So
strangely enough, his most efficient game was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm not even going to try to digest that and make sense of that. I just don't get it whatsoever. We got a question in here, or more of a comment in here from our friend Abe, who's saying the Lions are trash. They asked me to play receiver this weekend. Yes, Abe is a friend of the show, great guy. But that leads me right into my next question, which is about Khalif Raymond. Like, who expected Khalif Raymond to step up as the wide receiver one for the Lions? Lauren, he's been putting up good numbers. He's available in a ton of leagues. Is he a guy that you'd be confident just snagging off the waiver wire and plugging into a wide receiver slot this week?
Confident? No, but you might
strong
have to. Confident is very strong in that context. But what you should do with all of your Detroit wide receiver options here, pick them all up, take them to the bathroom, and flush them down the toilet. That is what literally it's going to become. I'm sorry, Alfredo. I'm sorry. Except Amon-Ra St. Brown, because he's a really cool name.
Cool.
And I do like Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is the only wide receiver.
He's an Egyptian god. So yeah.
Yeah. He is.
God, that is exactly what Lauren said throughout the entire.
I know, from the very beginning.
Lauren and I, we're like this. We're becoming best friends now.
Besties for Evs. So yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I really do like.
Lauren fell in love with Amon-Ra St. Brown before she ever even saw him take a snap. She just saw the name and she was like, "This guy, yes,
I love
all
this." I did, as I petted my hair. Speaking of the St. Brown pair, I do want to mention him sibling when we get to that later on. But yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown is someone I don't mind having some confidence in. Other than that, no. Speaking of really bad running backs who are terrible at running the football but somehow score fantasy points, DeAndre Swift. But we can move on.
It is unfortunate. I mean,
he's terrible.
I will say, I've watched every Lions
but he's
game
really
so
good
far.
at fantasy.
And I tweeted that out not too long ago where I said Jamal Williams is a better running back than DeAndre Swift. And, you know, if you're looking at an all-purpose running back, pass catching and all that, obviously DeAndre Swift is better. But if you're looking at a pure between the tackles running back, I mean, that's Jamal Williams. He is the better guy there in Detroit, as crazy as that sounds. And I'm not saying that DeAndre Swift isn't a fantastic football player. The role that he has on that offense is solid. And I think that he's going to finish as a top 5 running back. But he really does struggle with the between the tackles rushes.
Just
One
look
more question.
PFF. It's gross.
And actually, that, you know, again, this show is just flowing so well. And that leads me right into my next question, which is for Alfredo. And Alfredo, Jamal Williams, you know, we know that he's a good between the tackles, an A-back, as they would say in Detroit. But his role is starting to kind of fade away. And it seems like DeAndre Swift is just getting more and more leash every single week. So is Jamal Williams a guy that you're just kind of stashing as a handcuff, or are you still putting him in your flex spot?
The problem with Jamal Williams is he hasn't been biting enough kneecaps. Like, that's been the issue this year. He just didn't fit that Detroit Lions moniker. Man, just to take a brief moment away from the fantasy stuff, as a fan, as a Dolphins fan, I wanted Jamal Williams on this team so bad because, as you can see, we cannot run the football as a unit. And he's just such an underrated player. But man, at this point, just the use just isn't there. It's kind of annoying, really, from this standpoint. So for me, I don't think you can throw him into your lineups unless it's like some kind of crazy 6 running back league where you need to start people. But yeah, he's just a bench stash, strictly a handcuff at this point. But if for any reason DeAndre Swift has to miss time, Jamal Williams to the moon. Like, get this man into NASA, and he has like top 5 RB potential at that point.
Well, I
kind of hate you for saying 6 running back league. I'm going to have nightmares about starting 6 running backs. That sounds awful. But sorry, what was that, Lauren?
I loved his interview when they were
he's the best.
Talking about, he is literally my favorite player in the NFL. And one of the reporters was like, "You leaving Green Bay?" He's like, "Golly, I didn't leave Green Bay. They kicked me out." He's like, "Then I went to the Lions and they taken me to dinner and they're feeding me good." I was like, I love Jamal Williams so much. My husband, who is a Lions fan, he and I watched that interview like 5 times in a row, laughing hysterically because Jamal Williams is one of those, like, just he permeates positivity. And like, that's just what he does. You know, it's just, I hope he succeeds because of that, whether or not it's fantasy related or real football. But Jamal Williams is so cool.
He really is.
Feeding me
Easily
good.
one of the easiest guys to root for, without a doubt.
Oh, I love him. Love him. Sorry about
one
that.
One more game that I want to cover, and then we will get to this Thursday night matchup that kicks off in just a few hours. And this is the San Francisco 49ers against my Chicago Bears. I think this one's kind of tough too. I believe it's just like a 2.5 point spread. It should be a close game. Deebo Samuel just popped up on the injury report yesterday. So that's something to keep an eye on. Trey Lance isn't there to, do what he does at the in the red zone. So this is going to be kind of a strange game. But what I want to talk about first is Khalil Herbert, who looked great last week. I mean, against the Tampa Bay defense, he was the highest rated rusher by PFF. He had the highest snap share of any running back in the league. He looked fantastic. So with David Montgomery out, Alfredo, I'll ask you this first. I mean, are we just firing up Khalil Herbert as an RB1 now?
Dave, first of all, I want to thank you for asking me this question because you know that I love Khalil Herbert. I became such a Khalil Herbert fan during the draft season, and I thought that he'd get drafted in like the 3rd or 4th round, get this really great opportunity. And then all of a sudden he just drops down to, what was it, the 6th round to your Bears? Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, oh, maybe I was wrong. Like maybe he's really not that good. And lo and behold, here we are. Like, yeah, it took 2 injuries to get there, but you know what? Here he is. And he's making the best of his time right now as a starter. I mean, you're looking at the usage is just crazy. It was like 18, 19, 18 carries. And now all of a sudden the passes are coming and getting 5 receptions last game. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still kind of hard. And I know, Lauren, you're probably going to tell me, some stones, but I can't put him in the RB1 conversation just yet. Like I'm not that comfortable yet, but I'll absolutely fire him up and put him in my lineup as the RB2. I don't care who he's playing. Right. The fact he can do it against Tampa, the fact that he's getting the usage. The Bears scare me. The Bears, and I'm so sorry, Dave, the Bears just kind of suck this year. You're just like my Dolphins, but he's comfortably in that high end, I'd say, RB2 status just because of the usage that's there.
I'm with you. And the really interesting storyline is going to be what happens when David Montgomery returns from his injury, because you cannot ignore what Khalil Herbert's done. And the reason that people drafted David Montgomery wasn't that the Bears were going to be this high-powered offense. It's that he was going to get all of the carries. And I'm anticipating some sort of David Montgomery seeing 50 to 60%, Khalil Herbert getting 30 to 40%, and then Damian Williams still getting a few touches. So, I mean, this was like the one shining light in the Bears offense for fantasy football was David Montgomery was going to be a workhorse, and we might not even have that anymore.
Yeah, now it can just get really gross.
Yeah. And another shining light that was quickly dimmed out was Justin Fields. So, Lauren, are you still holding on to any faith for Justin Fields this year? I mean, we talk about the rushing upside, but we have not seen that whatsoever. We talk about the deep ball, and he'll connect on those every now and then. But this is a team that just doesn't want him throwing the ball. It's like they are purposely just going as conservative as possible. So is he somebody that has any sort of relevance in fantasy football, or are you just cutting him and moving on at this point?
In redraft, I think by necessity, he may be one of those people that you just can't keep stashing and holding onto in the hopes that it could get this way. Like, have you ever watched like National Geographic or like the Animal Planet, and like a new baby horse is born or whatever, and like they try to stand up and their knees are all wobbly and they keep falling over. That is the Bears offense.
I'm going to mute you, Lauren.
They don't know how to walk yet, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to learn quite quickly. So I think by the end of the season, unfortunately, it's going to take a little bit of time to get there, but I think they're doing it correctly, which means they're not rushing anything. I think they're trying to figure out what works. I think they're trying to keep Justin Fields as healthy as possible. And unfortunately, that is leaning to, learning curves and some roadblocks and some knock knees for the little foal that, is just a, 1 hour old and now you're expecting it to walk. I mean, come on. But no, I think that for redraft purposes, he is one of those candidates that if you need to make room in your roster, I think that's the one who's going to have to go.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
Sorry, but I was right on the week 4.
I'm not discussing the Bears on this show anymore. I don't even know why
I was right though. I was right about Andy
why are you
Dalton.
hurting yourself?
Well, let's keep going on. I mean, another really exciting part of this Bears team was Jalen Johnson, who was just fantastic weeks 1 through 6, and then last week got torched by Mike Evans, who I'm pretty sure Mike Evans had to adopt him after the game and is Jalen Johnson's father now. So I already mentioned it a little bit. I'm sorry.
Did this just get dirty?
A little bit. Yeah. I mean,
it just happened.
Mike Evans is Jalen Johnson's father after that game. Those are just rules. When you do that to somebody on a football team, you become their father. That's just the way that this works. But what I want to talk about, and I already mentioned a little bit, that Deebo Samuel popped up with a calf injury on the injury report. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. But assuming this is nothing serious and Deebo Samuel is a full go on Sunday, are we tempering expectations because of Jalen Johnson, or are we expecting Deebo just to be the number 2 overall wide receiver that we've seen so far? Fredo, what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, I love Jalen Johnson, and I think that he has been such a good corner. And dude, I'm so sorry that like Uncle Mike now is just he owns him. Like that's it. Uncle Mike owns Jalen Johnson. It's over. But The thing, Debo is just such a different player than Mike Evans. Now, if he's hurt, that's a totally different story. I'm gonna have to ask my pocket doctor and ask Vig if everything's good, because he's my guy for all injury stuff. But with Debo said, if he's healthy, I have zero hesitation in starting him, because the way he's used is just so different. And this is one of the things that I love from my scouting background, is being able to see how players are used, not just what their talent is. And the way he's being used by Kyle Shanahan is just, he gets used on a lot of crossing routes, and a lot of times where the ball can just get into his hands, and he's not used the same way. Mike Evans is oftentimes sent deep and go up for the 50-50 balls. Debo gets put with a lot of space in front of him. And that's why
every time it seems.
Yeah. I mean, he's third in the league in yards after catch, because when he gets it, it's just open field in front of him. And I mean, we've all you heard this a million times. He runs like a running back once he gets the ball in his hands. So I'm not so worried about which corner is covering him, because it doesn't matter. The way he's used is kind of cornerback proof, whether the talent is cornerback proof, but his utilization is cornerback proof. So I've got no problems with it.
That's a fantastic breakdown. And, I was a little bit nervous about Debo, but I think that you just, you calmed some of my concerns.
I mean, he even gets carries too. It's just, he's a totally different specimen.
Dynamic. Specimen is the great word to use here. He's a freak of nature, and I love it.
I like using the word dog. That's what Debo is. He is a dog. When he gets the ball in his hand, you are not stopping him. When he sees the end zone, if there's just one person standing between him and the end zone, there's nobody that is stopping him from finding pay dirt. Now, Lauren, during the offseason, you and I, we ripped on Brandon Ayuk quite a bit. We didn't really expect his production to carry over into this year, and that's kind of exactly what's happening right now.
Did we?
I thought you did. I was a big time Ayuk fader. All right, I thought we were on the same page on this one.
No, I liked Brandon Ayuk.
All right,
and
so
you
let me ask you
him.
this. So let's talk about what we should do now. Is he somebody that you're looking to target in a trade? Are you trying to sell him to somebody else, or is he somebody that you're just flat out cutting at this point?
Unfortunately, I did have to flat out cut him, and I had to do it after the Bipocalypse. He's just one of those players where it is so incredibly unpredictable when it comes to Brandon Ayuk. But I think a lot of this is going to have to do with Deebo Samuel, because what we saw last year was Brandon Ayuk really stepping up to the plate and becoming a weapon when there was no George Kittle and when there was no Deebo Samuel. Now, what do we have right now? No George Kittle, and now we have an injured Deebo Samuel. So do we have this possibility here where we have a huge relevant game from Brandon Ayuk? Because if we do, and you have him on your bench, trade away and then don't have to worry about this ever again. But yeah, he's one of those assets where as soon as he has a good game, unless there is going to be unless his injury is serious to Deebo Samuel, and you should hang on to him. If he has a good game, he is one of those that you should be looking to get something that's a little bit more consistent for you and make out while you can. Unfortunately, I had to drop him, so I don't have that luxury of being able to do so.
Well, let's pull this up, because Dr. Vig just said that Deebo was
Thank you, Dr. Vig.
He was back at practice today, only rested one day, so I am guessing it's a very minor calf injury. So that's very good news that he's back at practice today. But I want to ask you the same question, Alfredo, because I think it's a really good one. I mean, what are we supposed to do with Brandon Ayuk? It seems like you got a pretty good understanding of this Kyle Shanahan offense. So is Ayuk somebody that's going to be salvageable at some point this season?
Your face. I'm sorry, Alfredo.
Dude, I'm gonna stop you right there.
We both just sighed and we were like, oh.
I know the offense. I don't know what's going on in Kyle Shenanigan's mind. Okay?
No one does.
He's another, like him and Matt Nagy need to go out for coffee and just talk about craziness, because I don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
We're off the Bears game, all right? Enough with
sorry. I
had to bring it back. Never mind.
I had to bring it back. But man, so if it's redraft, I'll actually say this for redraft and dynasty, I'm comfortable holding on to Brandon Ayuk, simply because the way the schedule kind of turns for the Niners is that it's going to get a little bit easier on the passing game. It gets easier for the receivers. The quarterback schedule in the fantasy playoffs is actually one of the easiest around. So that's why we call Trey Lance a buy on our dynasty show before he actually jumps into this, starting lineup, because it's going to happen very soon. Actually in dynasty, I just acquired Brandon Ayuk. And Dave, I'm so sorry. I traded Elijah Mitchell and Khalil Herbert. In return, I got T. Higgins and Brandon Ayuk and a second-round draft pick. So I was like, yes, please.
Those are two pretty good buy lows. Yeah.
Yeah.
T. Higgins is the guy right now that I'm going out and targeting.
Yeah, so I'll take that, especially if that running back situation gets ugly in Chicago. But Brandon Ayuk, I think right now you're okay holding him if you have him. If you just want to take a shot and it doesn't cost you a whole lot, cool, buy him. But I'm not trying to sell the farm to go in and get Brandon Ayuk.
All right. Awesome breakdown. Well, let's get to the meat of this show. Green Bay Packers tonight playing against the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona. First of all, I want to check with you. We might go a couple minutes over 45 minutes. I hope you guys are okay with that. You know, we've been having some good conversation today. But let's go ahead and start with this. And Lauren, I'll ask you first. Who the heck is going to step up tonight in Davante Adams' absence? And don't say Aaron Jones. That's the cop-out answer. What wide receiver is going to step up tonight?
So this one's interesting because for me, I think the cop-out answer is Randall Cobb. Like, I think that's almost too easy, though. Yeah. So I mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown. His brother, Equanimous St. Brown, I think is someone who could be a very sneaky play, especially in DFS because his value is incredibly low. So you can sneak him in if you're doing one of those big lineups to include Aaron Rodgers and Kyler Murray. I don't exactly know what platform you're using, but just see, he's one of those names I wouldn't mind sliding right in there. But for me, I think it's going to be St. Brown, but it's going to be boom or bust. And this is going to be unfortunate because there are a lot of names that Aaron Rodgers can target. And I don't know if you know this, but he's very good at quarterbacking in the NFL. So he can get it done. And but St. Brown is the one that really jumps out to me as someone that Aaron Rodgers has built up at least a modicum of rapport with, aside from Davante Adams and Alan Lazard. So I think he might be, besides Robert Tonyan and Randall Cobb, I think he might be that guy. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do believe St. Brown's targets have been rather deep too. So he may be kind of looking into some of those Davante Adams type routes. Of course, he's not going to be Davante Adams. That's not what I'm saying, but he could be an option if you're looking for a boom or bust option that is relatively inexpensive.
Yeah, and not only is Davante Adams out, Alan Lazard is also out, and then we just got word a couple hours ago that Marquez Valdes-Scantling is unlikely to play. So I mean,
he's terrible anyway. Just don't ever touch Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's
good for his like 2-catch, 100-yard, 2-touchdown game at least once a season. Best ball god.
Maybe.
I have him on every best ball roster.
You want to know he's also good for? 2 targets, 2 ginormous drops that are right in the end zone or right in front of the end zone, of which would have won the game. Nope. MVS, dead to me.
Fredo, I got another one for you. Sticking with the Packers here. I was really hoping this year that we'd get some consistency from Aaron Jones, but I mean, that is not happening whatsoever. He's as boom or bust as they come tonight. Boom week, bust week. What are you expecting?
So, Dave, before I get to the Aaron Jones stuff, Lauren, Randall Cobb is the cop-out because it's right. Like, that's why it's the cop-out because
but it's
like,
not
that's
spicy, Alfredo. It's not
spicy. Sometimes you want the bland. Like, just eat your veggies and that's it. It doesn't have to be spicy.
I love vegetables, but I also, you know what? I also love Diablo marinara sauce, and I don't like bland Alfredo sauce, so I'm going to go with a spicy take, and you go ahead and take all that cheese, mister. I'm lactose intolerant anyway.
Wow. I don't even know what to say to that. You heard my name, you heard Gary, you heard everything.
This show is just now a rap battle all of a sudden. I'll let you guys go at it.
Right, well, I think now I'll talk about Aaron Jones, I guess.
I'm sweating again.
So, Dave, you asked about Aaron Jones. Is it a boom or bust night tonight? Honestly, I think it's a boom night for him. It's just, I know he hasn't gotten the touches that we've wanted to see. You just listed basically half of the roster that's out tonight or likely to be out tonight. He's already the second leading receiver on the team. If there was a guy to step up, it's going to be Aaron Jones. So you look at his split of games without Davante Adams. In his last 4 games without Davante, he's had 5 touchdowns in them. So he's almost guaranteed for a touchdown tonight, maybe even 2. And oddly enough, and this is like the weird stat that keeps floating around there, Packers are 6-0 without Davante Adams. And that's
I heard that too. I heard
that. Crazy. It's wild.
So I don't know if you listen to Bill Simmons, but Bill Simmons calls that the Ewing effect. In regards to Patrick Ewing, New York Knicks back in the 1990s, that this team, for whatever reason, anytime Patrick Ewing would miss time, they would win. Like, just without fail. Patrick Ewing was out, Knicks were going to win. He calls it the Ewing effect, and basically what he says is that when a team is missing their best player, everybody else feels this need to step up, so everyone else plays their best games, and it just makes the entire team that much better. Bill Simmons, one of my favorite guys, he coined that phrase about 15 years ago, and I still use it quite frequently. But you talked about the splits with and without Davante Adams. I'm looking at it right now. In PPR games with Davante Adams, throughout his entire career, Aaron Jones averages 15.2 PPR points per game. Without Davante Adams, he averages 22.7. Huge difference there. fire him up. I've got Aaron Jones as my overall RB1 this week. But let's talk about the Cardinals. And I will ask you this question, Lauren. DeAndre Hopkins has not cracked 90 yards in a single game this season, but the Packers secondary is awful. So is this just going to continue to get spread around in Arizona? Or do you think this is the one game where Devontae Adams can finally blow up 100 yards, touchdown, do what we expect from DeAndre Hopkins?
I think that it could be a possibility. I'm curious how game script, I swear to God, I speak English, is going to affect the way that the Cardinals are going to be forced to run this offense. And also DeAndre Hopkins popped up on the injury report as well. So that is something I want to keep my eye on. I know it's not very serious, but you never know. That could limit.
When was the last time he wasn't on the injury report?
Like
him and T.Y. Hilton live on the injury report. And they
same thing with
play.
DeAndre Swift. It's obnoxious.
Yep.
But there is one pass catcher I think is going to be another one of those sneaky pickups, or not even pick up in DFS for the value, but also an interesting start as well, which could be a little risky because it's on Thursday night. But Chase Edmonds, he is the running back out of the two between James Conner that I like. And I think his receptions actually will be pretty darn good. I like him. And the Packers have some interesting stats. Michael F. Florio brought some of these up as well. Good friend of both of ours, Dave. And the Green Bay Packers, they're ranked in like the bottom 10 for defending against pass catching running backs, which I found very curious. They've allowed 3 touchdowns, couple hundred yards, like 40 receptions. So I think that may be a situational thing for the short yardage for Kyler Murray, but it's DeAndre Hopkins. He'll probably have like 3 receptions, a ginormous touchdown or 2, and be just fine.
That's what I'm hoping for. So, Alfredo, last question. If you want to talk anything to the DeAndre Hopkins, I'd love to hear it. But I also, and Lauren talked about this a little bit, but I want to know who you're choosing between James Conner and Chase Edmonds tonight. So DeAndre Hopkins, what your take is there, and then which running back in Arizona you should be starting as well.
Yeah, I mean, death, taxes, and D-Hop being on the injury report and then still getting a touchdown anyways. Like, it just happens every single week. And this year it's happened in a weird way. It's been 4 catches and then 2 touchdowns, 50 yards. Like, he's not doing it the normal D-Hop way. He's just consistently injured. So I'm not expecting any kind of huge blow up, but probably this more of the same with DeAndre Hopkins. And, Lauren, it's funny you say Chase Edmonds. I'm the exact opposite.
Really?
Give me James Conner. I don't necessarily think that James Conner is the more talented guy, but it's kind of become one of those things that we've sort of come to expect with the Cardinals is like they get in close and they're trying to preserve Kyler. Like, they're not trying to have him keep scrambling for his life. Like, the dude is 5'5", about 90 pounds. He looks like someone's son running around there. You don't want him having to go up against the defensive lineman. And they get James Conner when they get within that 5-yard line. It is instantly James Conner. He's got 6 touchdowns in 7 games. Chase Edmonds with a whopping 0. It's almost just a foregone conclusion that each game James Conner is probably going to get a touchdown. He might not do anything else, but he's going to get you that touchdown.
And
yeah, I just worry about the Packers. Go ahead.
On almost every goal line opportunity. Like, it's not like they're like feeding him and he like gets stuff, and then punches one in. It's like they get up to that 5-yard line. They put the ball in James Conner's hands and he just walks into the end zone every single time. But what was that you were going to say, Lauren?
I was just saying the Packers defense against the pure runner, right? Not necessarily the pass catching back, is significantly better than it is against the pass catching back, which is why I'm giving this lean to Chase Edmonds specifically for this matchup. But I do agree with you that that offense is trending around James Conner, which, first of all, thank you, Jesus, that he's not getting steamrolled into the ground because of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I hope Najee Harris survives his rookie season. That's the only thing I want to say.
Well, the fun thing about fantasy football is we use the tools that we have to guess as best as we can and make projections. But the second best thing is that we just get to watch football and see it play out. And we get that in just a few hours. So we will find out, very, very shortly, whether it's going to be a James Conner or Chase Edmonds night. I want to thank everybody for tuning into episode 21 of The Launchpad. I love the idea of expanding people's reach and breaking into new audiences, and that's what I hope to provide to my guests every single week. Be sure to tune in next week as I host Rich Rebar. I will see you next Thursday, as always, 4 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for tuning in.